Hi, I'm the True Ice Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, in my opinion, is the very best Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, period. Sure, the dub is awful, but hey, that was 4Kids' fault. You can't really mess up a 4Kids dub, am I right? The only thing I'll ever like about the 4Kids versions of anything really are the OPs, as those were actually legit good. Honestly, better than most of the originals, OP originals. Just saying. So wait, why am I talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! For a moment? Well, it's a series I've always loved, and I really wanted to talk about free games in particular. The Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds DS games. Though this won't be done in the usual style I do, I will use the K-Bash style since, to be blunt here, all free games are just so similar that I only need to talk about the stories about them and not much of the gameplay. Though to fill my quota up gameplay, I will talk about the decks I use since they were very interesting and I would recommend them if you ever play these games. Each of the games go through each of the individual seasons, sort of. The first one, Stardust Accelerator, goes through the first season. Shadows of Arcadia goes through the second, and the last one over the Nexus goes over the last two, but technically the fourth season wasn't even finished yet, so yeah. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Reviewer honesty here. I will admit to doing something that I don't regret for this review in particular, because I cheated in 3 ways. 1, I got all the cards. 2, got all the cosmetics, and 3, got all the dual rider parts. Now, I don't usually cheat for my reviews. I only do it when it's absolutely necessary. Here are the few cases where I actually deem it necessary, since 1, I don't want to deal with the hassle of collecting a bunch of cards to build a sloppy deck that I had to deal with when I had to deal with this game. I'll talk about this game one day, but that's for another day in its entirety. Second reason was because I played these games enough times without the cheats that I just thought, hey, why don't I just make up a bunch of decks for this game just so it'd be more interesting. And it was, in all honesty. So let us begin. This is Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D, the DS Trilogy. God, that name sounds stupid. I'm gonna try my best to short and be quick about everything as of retelling these game stories, and I'm just gonna start being the guy who's usually long-winded but can decide whenever he wants to be quick about it. So let's start. Stardust Accelerator stars us, a guy who forgot all of his memories and whatnot and now stuck in satellite, and oh god, I forgot I have to actually explain everything to make sense for everyone what's going on. Shit. I do recommend you watch all 3 series if they are a good watch, though you may skip the first series if it's not something you like. In any case, long after the OG and GX, some sort of big explosion destroyed Domino City and it kinda changed the world to some post-apocalyptic thing. Don't ask me, it's weird. Hey look, I love this series, but goddamn, some of its stuff is just really not explained. In this world, there's something called satellite, where basically these are where criminals and other outliers of society go to, where they repair and ship off things from it to go back to the city, Neo Domino City, that got rebuilt after the original one got blew up. During that time, a new type of dueling came into being, called turbo duels, where you play, and I have to say it, card games on motorcycles.
You say!
There's something you should know.
What is it you say?
Card games on motorcycles.
What?
I said card games on motorcycles.
I beg your pardon!
I said card games on motorcycles.
Which is not a bad idea. It changes the rules a bit, and it's still interesting to say the least. It basically requires a duel runner, or this thing, as duelists just kind of play the game normally. It's just on bikes with new rules in play that are very interesting to say. So in this series, there is something called the Crimson Dragon that's supposed to save the world when some great crisis happens to some quality, and it's by this guy right here, which I can't spell for shit, and I bet no one can without looking it up online. That's to do some Inca stuff, and mind you, it's not important now, but it will come up a bunch of times. So to bring out Quetzalcoatl, or the Crimson Dragon, since they kind of just usually call him the Crimson Dragon, I'm just going to refer to him as that, they need the signers to appear and summon him, who all the signers are people who bear the mark of the dragon himself. And director, or Rex Godwin, we are bringing Godwin's Law and himself into this shit now. Wait. Yeah, the dub changes a bunch of character dates and actually a few events in the series for some reason. Yes, the dub done by the most evil of dubbers for kids. Like, legit talking here. They changed 5D so badly that it lost a lot of its deeper meanings. Hell, we actually lost the final part of the final season because I don't know. I'm legit confused as anyone else. I should mention this now. If I ever do anime reviews in the future, because I really want to do some, I will never use a dub, ever. They are sorely lacking in most cases. And truly, my honest thoughts now, I can't stand most dubs due to how bad 4Kids butchers their dubs, and now I have to fear that, oh god, is this dub different? Though then again, they did not make the sheer mind fuckery that was the Card Capture Sakura series dub. And oh, mind you, what they did to it was so heinous that it makes me actually say in sheer fuckery that they made the 4Kids One Piece version look good. Yeah, it's that bad. Let's actually just get back to the story of this game. And ironically, going back to the plot, not a lot happens. It's just you trying to figure out your path, and it's not really interesting, as we don't feel like we're actually a part of the plot. Just kind of like being the third wheel to every event, while just moving our plot forward, and I gotta just start talking about this right now. You see, I was unable to actually finish this one in particular. Why that? Well, because I cheated. Some of the cards kinda work, and some speed duel cards will not work at all. This is how the game actually shows off the speed spells for me, and I can't do anything. It's forever broken at this point. Oh, I could try, but that would be still too hard. So I'm just gonna tell you what happens. So Goodwin, yeah, I'm just gonna use their official name, was trying to use man-made signer marks to draw out the power of the dragon, but it failed as we had to kill our brother's twins clones. Yeah, I'm not sure anymore, and I really don't care, as I was at my wit's end at this story because I just did not care. So after the planet fails, he just says fuck it and abandons the planet, and I just shrug in bewilderment as I just more sigh and annoyance than anything. And then the game ends. Good job. Congratulations. So yeah, that's the story in a nutshell, and yes, it was quite boring and dull. Honestly, the anime was way more interesting and was a way better watch than this playthrough ever was. So again, just watch the series, then play this game. Just skip it outright. It is that dull. And I honestly couldn't make that many decks for this one than the one it gave me, and one more, though it was still bad. Consider it. Oh yeah, if you're wondering why I'm not explaining the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh here, that's because I really don't want to go into that, since good god, I would need to talk about my own thoughts and feelings on the matter, and it would be complicated, but I will still talk about my own thoughts, just say it. And well, one of the decks I actually did make was a zombie deck, which was actually one of the first structure decks I ever got as a kid, and I really liked the concept. Prevent your opponents from making plays, and build up your own little army, and then strike down your opponent. Really fun idea. And since this was also the era of Synchro, it did prevent players from using that generation's spoken. And honestly, if anything, Synchro did create an issue for the entire series, if I must be honest, but then again, that's all sadness here. The game really doesn't make Synchros more valuable anymore. That's sort of sad, as if anything, this series speed killed this type of deck, if anything. If you haven't noticed, I again didn't mention the gameplay. Well, that's probably because the game is just dueling, and that is legit what you're doing for the most part. And I really could not actually explain dueling in Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, that's because I had this hard time explaining the game, as I can't explain game mechanics, but I'm somehow having a hard time explaining the simplest terms so it's easy to understand, but also because I wanted to talk about the deeper problems and mechanics of this series that aren't even a part of this game, but yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, I'll try and make an attempt, but you know. Well, this game is a card game that uses 3 types of cards. Monsters, the minions of the game. They are the major damage dealers, and they're usually the way you're going to deal damage to your opponent's life points, which, if they reach 0, you'll win. But there are other ways to win by some other means, but sometimes these monsters have abilities that can change how the battle functions a bit, like getting more attack points, reducing opponents, something of that order, or doing a lot of other things. But if that becomes a hassle and some monsters are causing you issues, well, no need to feel. Well, you got spell cards and magic cards, and the localization was odd, we just usually call them spell cards now. These can range to making your monster stronger, or making your opponent's monster weaker, or making new plays even possible by recalling them from the graveyard, where your monsters go if they die or cards are used. So, yeah, so you know. Though I recommend being careful, as sometimes your opponents can leave a few trap cards out of the field to make your plays a stop, as they work by setting them down and waiting until they can be activated or whenever. And the biggest problem for traps is that you have to wait till the beginning of your foe's turn to actually, meaningfully use them. And since most times than not, if they're placed on the floor, most players will actually immediately say, oh hey, that's a trap card, better watch out for it, better remove it, since a lot of times removing back row is so easy now that it's not even a worry. In any case, it is a really hard game to master, as this game is really different from most modern card games by allowing players to use any card from any time to make any sort of deck. Then in some regards allow for a high level of freedom, but in all fairness, it created a problem as now anyone can use any card to make any deck. Meaning it's kinda hard to balance certain cards for modern play since some cards came from the past to make new plays, with the more modern cards being able to break the game more easily. But also I need to mention something that's gonna be changing soon, because I just feel like it's gonna change. There are other types of monsters in this game. They come from the special or extra deck zone, where you basically have like synchros, fusion monsters, and later on XCs, link monsters. However, you can only have like 15 of those and they need a special requirement to summon. Though I feel like this next format, I'm going to feel like rush duels are just going to have to raise that hard cap to 20 now. That's just me, but that's kind of like the issue with Yu-Gi-Oh! Feature creep, where there's so many types of summonings that it will be impossible to balance by the sheer end of it all. I mean, heck, Kaiju's had to be a thing just because of the balance of this series is so out of place. Like, again, I love this series, but goddamn, this series balance is so over the place. Alright, tangent over. Let's actually talk about the look of the game, since I'm gonna just kind of codify this to one thing. It's fine, nothing bad. They will get better a bit, like more refined. I mean, like, yeah, they look great for the DS, though making them 3D models was a choice that I don't say was bad, but I would have preferred them to be just sprites, and they would have looked sharper and if anything just look better if anything. Though I need to explain something else when I'm actually talking about the models and other stuff. The AI in this game, how do I put this? It is by far the most confusing thing I have ever seen so far, ever. As sometimes it will make the dumbest choice I've ever seen in my life. It kind of feels like all the AIs are very built for new players, so even if the deck you are using is utter garbage, you still have a chance to win. But then again, the deck you were given at the beginning of this game is not even worth the cardboard it was put on. And what's worse, sometimes you might be forced to duel with them, with something that's not usually done anymore: tag duels. Yeah, the type of duel where you both take turns playing on the same field against two other foes, which I always thought was interesting at times, but it has to work with someone who you could synergize with easily, and the one I got stuck with really didn't help. In fact, I think tag duels represent the issue with the game's AI, as you can tell, these guys are not playing on at least on a sufficient level. You see this guy right here? My foe is using a Lightsworn deck. I know it's competitive and all, but it suffers from the biggest problem that they actually just mostly throw their decks into the graveyard. But that strategy doesn't usually work all the time, because I literally won against one by literally using such a cheap deck that it was even worse than the one that you're given in this game when I was playing on the old Yu-Gi-Oh! Official online game. That was so long ago, and yeah, I remember those days. And that's really the issue. Most of the AI will not actually, think and go through a situation. They will just play whatever they want and just attack you, because they think that is the literal best move to make, which is just really bad design, if anything. So now that you understand the kind of issue this series has, and the messy construction of this game in its entirety, I can actually now talk about the sequels, as they are far superior to this game, as we dive into Shadows of Arcadia. This follows the Dark Signer arc, the best arc of this series in my opinion, and honestly is considered to be the best. Honestly, if it ended here, I think everyone would have considered this to be the legit best series in the entire franchise. This game, you follow you again, but though a different guy who is an OC, Don't Steal, who was taken in by Arcadia Movement, a group of psychic duelists who had the power to actually summon the power of cards, as you were kidnapped by them for having connection to the spirit world, a place where dual spirits exist where the monsters come from. Yeah, I know, it's stupid, but just roll with it. Also, you were part of Team Satisfaction, Usai's group. Yeah, it's kind of weird the amount of things you're really tied to, though again, how the heck could they make you a part of anything without making it sound odd at first? I'm not holding that against the game, but you know I'm calling a little issue on that now. It does go through the beats of the show, but sometimes it feels off at times because, again, literally going through everything, but feeling like it's only going through some of it, as some characters just pop in and come out of nowhere, like Gregor or Devak. Wait, who? Yeah, this guy. This was the only character who didn't any get sort of background until an art book came out to explain what they originally planned for him. Though it was really never explained, like, ever. I mean, yeah, he uses a beast deck, but they never explained why they chose that deck. Or, I mean, like, sure, they had, like, cool new monsters about these, like the Earthbound Immortals, if they were boss monsters that are, trying to say the least, as most of them don't even have a theme to combine them all. I mean, like, they have one rule about them, but that rule being they have to have a field spell on the field, or they can't be summoned, or else they'll be destroyed by their effect and they need a field spell for some reason, though I think this was entirely added due to wanting them to tie into turbo duels. Oh yeah, turbo duels. They actually function now, strangely enough, I'm not sure why, and they also decided to add Speed Roll 2 for this game, which wasn't introduced till the next season, but who's caring anymore, as I'm honestly okay with it, since it was the better version of Speed World, as it actually does add something to the duel rather than just being there and forcing you to use speed spells. Though, going back to the story for a moment and the weird awesomeness that was the 4Kids Dutch version, I need to mention the censorship of this series, where it strangely enough kept a lot of the things that should have been censored in for some reason. Like, Carly died originally from defenestration, or as the cool kids would like to use, defenestration! I mean, like, they censored it to being where she got kicked into the Shadow Realm. Ironically enough, Gregor here died by literal hanging. Yeah. This series is kind of weird where it wants to kind of like censor stuff. I'm just saying, it's weird. Well, let's kind of bring up the mood and mention the decks I use, as I think it's fun to use all sorts of decks when playing these. As let's begin with a deck that I made up because, you know, being ironic and all, the Psy-Death, which is a sort of joke about the shortening about psychics and death, though it's kind of because of a localization issue, which, yeah, it's stupid still, but in any case, this deck really requires a lot of dumping your life points until you beat the ever-loving shit out of your foes and summon up your boss monsters. It's a really fun deck that requires you to make sure that you have a lot of recovery options, as most players don't actually bother with life points anymore, since the game kinda lets you do whatever you want as long as you still have one life point to win with. You know? The only issue I ever suffered from the deck was poor formatting of my deck, as I usually added a few more cards that didn't add to the deck synergy. So sometimes that meant I was drawing cards that did nothing. So yeah. Though I need to actually mention something else, as during the duels, sometimes the monsters will have 3D models that will pop up, depending on what monster it was. And they usually look fine, though it does slow the game down like bad. Just bad. In fact, the game kinda chugged a lot of times, and I'm not particularly sure why. Though I will say the music is the best part of this game, as it's legit good music. In fact, I used it a lot in this video, and I usually try to listen to the music while I'm reviewing these things, so, you know, editing stuff, because, you know, you don't want to hear your own voice start shooting yourself. But in any case, the music is really dang good. I mean, heck, I would use this for some background stuff if I needed to. So, you know, I am going from subject to subject on a whim just because it would make it more interesting. So you all know. Like, for example, I forgot to mention duel puzzle. Oh joy, these. Look, at certain parts of the game, sometimes they will require you to do duel puzzles, which are basically just, you need to win in one turn with certain cards that you're given. And, I'm not a puzzle guy. I don't like puzzles, they're not my thing. They're just not that fun. Though the game also has special rule duels where basically someone will make a condition you have to win with. like starting off with 4,000 life points or taking 500 each standby phase. That can make it a little harder, but I think it can make it interesting since you have to play against them. But with a deck like the Devotion deck that I made, that was basically a C deck that just focuses on swarming and destroying, I love those types of decks. Seriously, I love them a lot, and will be the next prominent deck I use in the next game, spoilers. But the deck is also about summoning the boss monster quickly and just wiping as quickly as possible, though being only a 200 beater, it's not that useful at times, but so useful. In any case, this game is still fun, as we now get to talk about the next one, over the Nexus, and kind of my own thoughts on which one is better. Over the Nexus, in my opinion, has the better gameplay in any case, because this one where all the things were a little more tighter and the AI was actually more functioning. But in any case, the story does lack a bit, as they feel like they skinned a little more than what Arcadia did. This one goes through the Crash Town arc and the God, I forgot the name of this arc. Really? Oh well. This takes place in Crash Town, where, you know, the Crash Town season happened, as we don't stay long in it though, because of a gang war that's starting up, and we just lead to avoid it all. What they're mining, I'm not particularly sure. We have a friend there, he left a while ago to do his own thing, and we kind of come back here later on, do some team satisfaction thing, because everyone mostly who was a Shadow Rider, just because of what Colin or Kiryu did, but originally no, Carly never gets that kind of, like, what the hell happened to her after all this, and who again? Seriously, I keep forgetting this guy's name every time. Though that's more of a critique of the show than again the game, but still applies. We also have Misaka here, a character who's friend with our friend Taru, who both plan on joining a Turbo Duel team, which is a new thing in this part of the series, which I'll talk about later, but yeah, that's just something. This game also had to deal with something with the Isolators, which was a group that Rex was a part of for some reason, and it's really complicated as we meet these three who are trying to destroy Neo Domino City, as it will prevent somehow the end of the world, but the characters won't allow it, and yada yada yada. It requires a bunch of duels and a tournament to win, yada yada yada. You know the drill. Honestly, not a lot happens, though that's for two reasons, because well, not a lot happens, and I was just going through this game Turbo style, and not hitting Turbo. This game's a lot more frequent with the duels, and sure, they were fine, but still good regardless, as I did have 3 decks for this one, that being the Earth Invaders, Dino Thunder, and 6 Million Victory. Honestly, out of all 3 decks, I wish I got more improved on the Invader deck, as it was basically a combination of the Malefics from the movie, Earthbound Immortals from the last game, and the Mech Lords, the new boss monsters in this game, as they were poorly designed to counter Synchros. Poorly. They are no longer much viable since XYZ monsters are just taken over, but in any case, the deck's idea was basically summoning one of the boss monsters onto the field as quickly as possible and just ramming through everything as quickly as humanly possible. The biggest issue was that if one of them goes down, you have no defense, because there is no way you can use any other monsters other than the one monster you have on the field. So that was a problem. The other one was Dino Thunder, though that was an accident, as I never meant to call it that, as this one being the Drax deck, which are just a bunch of fire dinosaur monsters that are pretty good and are really help with its generic support of dinosaurs plus pyro monsters thing, so it's easy to swarm and just have a beatdown effect, which I just love again. Plus also, it was really a good showing of the graveyard becoming a resource thing, which was becoming a real problem at the time. The name Dino Thunder was from Power Rangers and whatnot, because I thought these were electric monsters and not, you know, fire monsters. So, here's the other name I should have made up with. Honestly, what's more surprising is that I've actually watched the show when I was young with my mom, so that's something. Honestly, this last season was a real issue for me because it had to deal with time travel, and that's just something I'm not for, since, look, time travel in a story can really mess it up, and it's why I have this kind of new principle of I hate it on principle now thing with it. but it doesn't really come up that much. But in any case, this one's a little bit different since now the turbo duel teams are now like a thing where you have to kind of like let your teammates go first and they handle a few duels, then you go in and try to help out. I like the concept as it can create situations where you are literally put against the wall. Though it could create the opposite effect at the same time, as now they are entering a battlefield where they have no advantage at times. And this was nowhere clearer than my deck I used for this. And that was the 6 million victory deck, which was just a 6 samurai deck. This deck right here. This deck is massively broken for the game, as it's so easy to break unless I got a bad hand, and even then it was easy to recover. This deck is all about swarming non-stop. I swear, this is a truly bizarre mess, as I love it. As they're still really good to this day, as support for this deck never went away, and in fact, you can still use this type of deck still. Seriously, they were that unstoppable. And what's weird here, this deck pretty much made me win the game just by ease of the deck's use. In fact, when I was against Primo, and because this was where we had a good start, he had a real good start. Like, he had a 6,000 beater on the field, which had, I don't remember, a Synchro Monster on him. And basically, it was just terrifying, but since I had a good hand, I basically wiped him. And just had a bunch of monsters on the field that just killed him in one turn. Yeah. It becomes that easy to win at times. I'm more surprised that anyone took this hard. By that point, I had just won the game, and it kind of felt heartless to me, as everything happened so fast. I didn't care anymore. Not to say it's bad, it's still good, but don't play for the plot, because everything's flat here mostly. So that was the 5D's Trilogy. I hope you like it. I did. It was a game series that I really did like, and I needed to get rid of that footage someday, and today was a good day. Y'all have a good day. Remember, stay smart, stay bright, and don't be a fool.